All right, we're going to try this developer diary thing. What I'm thinking I'll do for this first one, just to start simple, is go over my desktop and just show you some of the tools that I'm using when I work day to day. And there's a few goodies on here. You'll see some in development stuff as well. Now, the first thing you'll notice about my desktop is that it's a little unusual in that I have these sort of weird thingies here where my icons are going in them. And that's a program called Fences. It's now available on Steam, but you could get it before online from the company directly. And basically what it lets you do is it lets you drag and create a fence. You can also create a directory portal, give it a name, and then you can, drag icons into it. And it just lets you sort of organize your desktop. It also lets you have several pages of icons. Alright, so basically these fences that I've got here have organized my main programs into categories. So under the system category, this is not development stuff, this is just stuff that I use sometimes. You've got Geekbench. This is something that gives you a score for how fast your computer is if you want to test it. I think everyone knows what Chrome is. LibreOffice is basically like Microsoft Office. It's got a spreadsheet, word processor, those things. I don't use that too much, but you need it sometimes for business, whatever. GeForce Experience, that comes with the video card. Oracle VirtualBox, that I do use in development. It basically lets you create virtual computers on your computer. And the usefulness of that for me is that I can create a Linux box that runs on my computer while I'm running Windows. And the Linux box can act as a database server that the Cubic server runs. So I can run a Cubic server on the computer here using a database on a virtual Linux machine that's running in VirtualBox, and basically test on my own little server new features and things when I want to do that. CCleaner is a program by a company called Piriform. It basically lets you delete files you don't need, uninstall programs. Specky is also by the same company. It just gives you some specs for the computer. I think most people know what Dropbox is. Lets you share files online. This little thing to customize the behavior of this Fences stuff. Notepad++ is just a better version of Notepad for text editing. I use that every day. Kindle, I think people know what that is. Skype, you all know what that is. Slack is what I use when I'm talking to Beta or Cosmic, and I use Slack every day. We just use it as a sort of a chat platform where we're communicating with each other. And AirParrot is a little tool that lets me stream my desktop to my Apple TV. If I want to watch something from the computer on my television set, I can use that. Not for development, just for personal use. Okay, so now moving on to the Code tab. We've got Code Compare. That's a comparison program where you can have two pieces of code and you can take a look at the difference between them. That's useful sometimes, like supposing Cosmic is working on the program and I'm also working on the program, and then I update and I see that he's made some changes and I'm not sure like what changes he made. I could use Code Compare and compare the two versions and see, oh, I see he changed this string here that was wrong or whatever. And it also lets me check before I commit new changes to the program. It lets me check what did I change and is this ready to go? So sometimes you forget, and then you can just sort of go back and look and see what you changed. Unity, I think most people know what this is, but Unity is basically, it's a game engine that has a C# scripting built into it. And it's used by a lot of companies now to make games for iPhone, Android, PC. It's a 3D game engine, but you can use it for 2D games as well. We don't use it for Cubic Castles. We use our own engine. I have it installed because I thought I should learn it, and I've written some small things in it, just to learn how it worked and see what it was and that kind of thing. Maybe one day I'll use it to make a game. I don't really know right now. Scrivener is a word processor for writing novels. It's for personal use. Sometimes I write short stories and things like that. I haven't written much recently. Android Studio. This is what we use to compile the Android version of the game. The iOS version has to use Xcode, which means it has to be on Mac OS X. I have a laptop, which is a MacBook Pro, that has an Apple development environment on it. But actually, most of the time, when it comes to making the final builds, it's Cosmic that does them for the release. But I did do the initial Android port of the game some time ago. Visual Studio, this is what we use mainly day to day to work on the game, to develop. It's a C++ IDE, and IDE's integrated development environment. This is actually an old version. This is from 2010. We don't use the very latest version. This is kind of a pain to upgrade. Unless you really need something new, then there's no reason to do it. So we're still using this older version. Just another updated version of Unity here. Tiled is a program for editing tile maps in a tile game. Not used in Cubic development. I just installed it because I thought I might use it with Unity for testing some tiled stuff, and sometimes I'll make some maps, some design things in Tiled, but generally speaking, I don't really use it day to day. IntelliJ IDEA and Scene Builder are not used in Cubic development. Again, this is sort of personal project stuff. IntelliJ is a Java IDE, and it basically lets me code in Java. There's a little bit of Java code in the Android version of Cubic Castles, just to act as sort of the front end to the Android operating system, which is Java based. But then it uses something called JNI, which lets it hook up to the C++ part of the code, which is common through all of our different platforms. But that Java code we do it in Android Studio, not in IntelliJ. IntelliJ, I'm using something called Java Effects to build desktop programs, and Java Effects is basically the cross-platform GUI, graphic user interface. You could make anything in it. You could make Audacity, for instance, or you could make Acrobat Reader or whatever. So it's just a way to build desktop programs that'll run on different platforms. Moving on to the media fence, we got your VLC media player. Just a free media player for Windows. Very good. It'll play a whole bunch of different formats. Sometimes you want to watch a video, you can do it with VLC. Fraps is what I normally use to record Cubic gameplay. Like if I'm making like the farm preview or something like that, I'll use Fraps to record the gameplay. Moho 12, not used in Cubic development. It's a 2D animation program. I'm always sort of toying with the idea that one day I'll make a 2D animated cartoon, but I never have. So basically this is just sort of playing around stuff. Acrobat Reader, that's for reading PDF files. Like sometimes people send you PDF files like business contracts, stuff like that, so it's useful for that. iTunes, I think everyone knows what that is. iSpring FreeCam 8, I'm using that right now to record this video. Vegas Pro, this is my main video editing program. I got that on Steam. And Audacity is a sound editor. I don't actually use Audacity normally because I have Adobe Audition over here, which we'll get to. Basically, they kind of overlap in the features. But they're both sound editors. So moving on to the graphics fence, you got Adobe Photoshop. This is CS6 version. I don't use the latest version because Adobe switched to a subscription model. And there's really nothing in the newer versions of Photoshop that I need. So it just doesn't make sense to pay $30 a month when I have what I need already. So I'm just sticking to with the CS6 version. I doubt I'll ever sign up for the subscription stuff, but you never know. Maybe one day I'll have to. But for now, this works just fine. Affinity Photo and Affinity Designer are basically Photoshop and Illustrator replacements. And they're very cheap and they're very capable. They do maybe like 99% of what Photoshop does, and they do a few things that Photoshop doesn't do. So if you're new and you're looking for a graphic editor and you want something that's kind of like Photoshop most of the way there, but you don't want to pay the $30, $40, $50 a month to Adobe, look into these programs. They're really great, actually. I bought them, even though I don't use them day to day. I sort of bought them in solidarity with the company. I think it's good to have another option, and an option that's not subscription based. PixPlant is a program. It's not really used for Cubic. It's more for realistic textures. Cubic has cartoon textures, but basically PixPlant, you can take a picture, and there's a lot of sites online that you can get free pictures, open source pictures. So you can take a picture of like a grassy field, drag it into PixPlant, and PixPlant will create from that seamless textures for you. And it can even create different kinds of maps that you could use in a program like Unity or another graphic engine to add some grass to a game or a stone wall or whatever. Modo was my main 3D program until recently. I still use it. It's got really good tools. It's got great modeling. It's pretty good to paint in. The sculpting's not bad. It's a general 3D program. It's like Maya or 3D Studio Max or these things. It used to be made by a company called Luxology. It was bought by another company called The Foundry. The Foundry makes sort of high-end tools that are used in film production, like Nuke. And they're still developing it. They're up to version 11 now. I just find the Foundry is not quite as good to work with as the Luxology was before. And so I decided that I would learn Blender and sort of stick with this version for now. So lately I've been using a combination of Blender and Modo in my 3D work. 3D Coat is a 3D specialty program. It allows you to do all kinds of little things that the main 3D programs don't really focus on. So it does voxel sculpting. It does UVing. You can paint in it. You can retopologize in it. If you don't know what retopology is, well, maybe we'll go over that in a different video. But basically, it's a 3D specialty tool. Substance Painter and Substance Designer are also 3D specialty tools, but they're focused on making the various maps and textures that 3D objects use. And then Blender, it's free, it's open source, it's a general purpose 3D program like Maya or 3ds Max or Modo. It has very good sculpting, very good painting. There's a lot of really good plugins you can get for it to do all kinds of things, improve the painting or grow trees or whatever. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there's a program, there's a little movie that they made, Agent 327. It's on YouTube. It's free to watch. And, it's almost Pixar quality, and it was all made in Blender. So it's very, very capable. If you're starting out and you want to learn to do 3D, the only downside to learning Blender is maybe that, it's not the industry standard. Like if you're going to go work in the industry, you're probably going to be looking at Maya or 3D Studio in a big company. But Blender is being used more and more, and there's a lot of overlap between like what Blender does and what Maya and these other companies do, these other programs do. So, if you learn Blender, I think it's a great way to start, and it's a great program, and it's free. These other programs like Maya is going to cost you a fortune. So, yeah, very good option. The tools are really strong. I mean, I've used a lot of the other professional programs, and Blender is pretty capable compared to them. Moving on to audio, you've got Adobe Audition. It used to be called Cool Edit long time ago, and Adobe bought Cool Edit and turned it into Adobe Audition. It's basically a sound editor. It lets you clean up audio, remove background noise. You can speed up a sound, slow down a sound, do those kind of things. Basically, it does very similar things to Audacity. If you're new and you don't have a lot of money, I don't think you really need to buy this. You can just download Audacity and do 90% of what this one does. FL Studio is what's called a DAW, Digital Audio Workstation. The same thing for Bitwig. Basically, those are music creation programs. They let you use virtual instruments. They let you record instruments. They let you record sound. and they let you edit notes on a note editor and play music through the virtual instruments. And you can make pretty much any kind of music in these programs. It's pretty common, like, to use FL Studio to make electronic dance music. I mostly use Bitwig these days, but I own FL Studio. I've owned it for years. They're both very good programs. I find Bitwig is just a little bit more the style of the way that I like to work, so I tend to use it more often. Alright, so those are the tools that I use day to day. There's actually a lot of other little tools I have, but I just don't use them all the time, so they're not on my desktop. And maybe we'll go over some of those one day, but for now, these are the main ones. So just thought maybe we could look at some of these icons down here. This thing here, this is just a little, this was a dinosaur that I was sculpting in Blender just to test how the sculpting tools worked. Okay, so UV Tweak and Bundler 2. So those of you who've looked at the textures in Cubic Castles, you know that it's not a bunch of little files with each thing. Like, this is the clam here. You don't have a little file with just the clam, or a little file with just this umbrella. So you get this kind of like weird file where all the textures are packed together. So that's a pretty common thing to do in game development. It's called texture packing, and it's useful for a variety of reasons. One reason is that you're not always loading lots of little files in and out of memory. It's just one big file. There's a lot of other little reasons for it. It saves memory. And so a lot of programs these days, they have texture packers built into them. Like, I think Unity might have one built into it. I know Spine, a 2D animation tool, has a texture packer built into it. But you can also buy a program called Texture Packer, which is very capable, and it'll take all of your little files and find the best way to, sort of pack them in. It'll rotate them and squeeze them and try to find the most compact way to put them all together. So for us, the way that we pack all these textures is we use this thing called Bundler 2. Bundler 2 was actually written by Betamax, and so we have our own packer. If you're a new developer, you can buy a texture packer and use that. Why do we write our own if there's other tools available? I'm not sure when he first wrote this. It may be that at that time there wasn't tools available, because this is like an engine we're using that's been developed over many, many years. UV Tweak is a program that allows us to go from the cubic model format back to OBJ format, which is a common 3D format that we can export from the 3D programs when we're making new objects. UV Magic takes OBJs and writes the cubic model format. Cubic model format is basically just kind of OpenGL format, basically saved as binary, and it makes loading the models faster. So we basically we export OBJ files from the 3D programs, and then we drag them into this UV Magic, and then it'll output I have one here. Yeah, MODL file. This is the kind of file that Cubic uses. So, this is okay. So we'll make the MODL files with this, but we can also use it to take a look at the models and see how they look. So if I run this, you can actually see here this is a ball, but there's no texture on it right now. So we have some new balls coming. Here's a sneak peek. So here's a basketball, and if I drag the texture on that, I can sort of see, okay, well, this is what it's going to look like in the game, and here's what the texture looks like, and then when I hit this save thing, it'll pop out the ball as an MODL file. Like this, I think, probably wrote one somewhere here, new ball export maybe. You can look at some of these other things that are here. We've also got this speaker. There's a speaker block that's coming. There's another version, another version. What are the speaker blocks for? Well, you'll just have to wait and see. All right. Maybe for these sound files down here, there's some kind of theme song. Wonder what that's all about. So there you go. That's the tools that I use day to day. I hope you guys found this interesting. If you did, then maybe I'll do another video.